We'll go ahead and call our meeting to order, and the second signer of the bill is Representative McCall. But before we do that, again, don't forget to sign in. Those in the audience, turn off any electronic devices you might have. And if anyone wishes to speak for or against this bill from the audience after we had the presentation and questions from our committee, we'll also open it up. I think the sign-in sheet is over there by the podium. Okay, Representative McCall.
Madam Chairman, since Chairman Powell is not a morning person, he will be here in just a minute. But before he presents this resolution, do you mind if I give the committee some boring statistics on the Savannah River lakes on the north end of the river, so you kind of understand what he's talking about in this resolution?
The author has that right. The second signer has that right.
The resolution is dealing with the Corps, and some things they don't take into consideration, I think, is the three big lakes on the upper Savannah of Hartwell, Russell, and Clarks Hill. I put these numbers together for something I did a while back, just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with. There's 1,100 cubic feet per second evaporated off of those three big lakes in, like June, July, and August. And if you do the math out, that's 8,250 gallons per second that evaporates off of those lakes, which equates to about 500,000 gallons a minute that goes up in the air. And I mean, granted, it's going to come back down somewhere, but that's the kind of volume that we're losing, and there's nothing we can do about it. The Corps says to keep the river alive and help float them boats in and out of Savannah. Originally, they said the lowest that they could release was 3,600 cubic feet per second out of the Augusta Dam. That equates to 27,000 gallons per second, 1.6 million a minute, and about 10 million gallons every 6 minutes at the low flow. Now they have backed it off to 3,100 cubic feet per second when it got so dry back last year, which is still an enormous amount of water that is leaving those three lakes. Allen's bill deals with Clarks Hill, or what we on the Georgia side call Clarks Hill, South Carolina called it Thurman, and Hartwell, because Lake Russell is a constant level lake and it can't fluctuate more than 5 feet. They can't generate power out of it. So it relatively stays fairly full, but Clarks Hill and and Hartwell drop immensely when it comes to dry weather, and the flows going down the river plus whatever evaporates. And if you want to see the full pool and the drop dead pool levels, I got them here for that. But I'm gonna let Alan talk about his resolution, and I just wanted y'all to understand the kind of water volume that we're talking about that goes away. And I'm sure West Point and Lake Seminole and all have similar volumes gone, but this is what we're dealing with on this resolution, and it's trying to urge the Corps to use a little bit of common sense. But I'm going to let Alan talk to y'all about that. I just want you to know those numbers.
I don't see Representative Powell yet, so you can go ahead and present the bill. It's House resolution. For our committee, we can consider resolutions at our full committee, but at that point in time also we would take input from the audience as well. But if you'll go ahead and present House Resolution 532, and I think
you want me to go down there? Or
you can do it from here.
What this is a result of a Savannah River caucus, I guess, is what we have created, and the impetus of that thinking is to get everybody that touches the Savannah River, representatives, senators, congressmen on the Georgia side. South Carolina's supposed to be doing the same thing on that side, and it will give us all of those congressmen on both sides of the river plus 4 U.S. senators to try to influence the Corps engineers more so than Tom or Allen or John Burns or somebody from down on the south side to talk to the Corps. We thought if we could get all the federal officials on both states, it might convince the Corps a little bit more. like Randy said about this resolution, it ain't worth the pulpwood that the paper made out of sometimes when you deal with the Corps. But what it does, the resolution is urging the Corps to consider the economic impact of the lake levels for the communities around the lakes that have built and depend on the economics of visitors, folks going water skiing, boat sales, and there's Alan right there, and I'm going to let him finish.
This is what the boat brought in, so catch your breath. Catch your breath for a minute. And Representative McCall, if you can just summarize what you've done so far, Representative Allen will give you a chance just to catch your breath for a minute. And Representative McCall, why don't you summarize what's happened so far?
Alan, what I was telling them was I just went through some numbers about how much water evaporates off the lakes, how much goes down the river through the Thurman Dam, and that the Corps could cut that back, and that basically we're talking about. I went into a little bit of detail about the Savannah River Caucus and why from both sides of the river, and I was just getting into the line 8 there where we're trying to urge the Corps to use economic decisions.
Sounds to me like Representative McCall's already handled this resolution. It has no binding effect. As Tom had said, we have established a Savannah River Caucus because of the economic and natural resources and necessity of some of us banding together. The Corps of Engineers is just quite frankly what it is. It's the Corps of Engineers. Bureaucracies are one thing, but that's a bureaucracy within a bureaucracy within a bureaucracy. Those of us who have lived up on the eastern side of the state for years, we realize that the Corps, they have missions, generation of water, flood control. That was on those lakes and the impoundments on the Savannah River. That was a Corps mission, but recreation was never included into it. The recreational part is a vital part of those impoundments up our way. When the water fluctuates 12, 14, 16 foot each year, it has a dramatic input on the economic development and the tourism factor on that side of the state. What we're asking here is just to send them a resolution copying the governors, the U.S. senators, and the congressmen on both sides of the Savannah rivers, Georgia and South Carolina, asking them to take concern of what this resolution speaks to. The South Carolina, as a footnote to what Tom may have spoke about, our counterparts on the South Carolina side are supposedly forming a Savannah River Caucus for their side of the Savannah River. Hopefully, with both states working together and getting the involvement of our U.S. congressmen and the 4 U.S. senators, they can bring a little bit to bear on the Corps of Engineers about how they manage those lakes up and down the eastern side of the state. And that's what doesn't have any mandates, no cost. It just sends a message.
Thank you. And now to our committee, we'll have questions if anyone has any questions. And we'll try and get your numbers as they come up. Again, identify yourself and then ask your question. Number 9.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chuck Williams, Athens area chairman, good to have you with us this morning. I know last year this committee spent a good bit of time conversing with the Corps of Engineers about the Flint River Basin and the challenges there, and the fact that I guess it's the Apalachicola, there are some flow requirements downstream on the Flint dealing with different aquatic life and whatnot. As it relates to the Savannah River, Mr. Chairman, are there any flow requirements downstream? Chairman McCall mentioned navigation at the Port of Savannah. Any flow requirements either due to navigation or aquatic life, if you will, to your knowledge, that impact how the Corps manages those upstream lakes?
To my knowledge, I really can't answer that question because, we're sort of unique. The Savannah River that ran from the mountains down to Augusta, that's one stretch. With the lake impoundments through the 50s and the 60s of Hartwell at one end, Lake Russell in the center, and then Clark's Hill, that goes to Augusta. Below Augusta, the river flows free down to Savannah. So I'm sure there is no doubt some type of requirements that water flows. It's got to flow down through there. The aquatic part of that You know, you're going to have to ask a tree hugger about that, because quite frankly, I couldn't tell you. All I know that there used to be some show enough catfishing on down that part of the country when I was a kid, but no, I couldn't really tell you. Somebody better qualified can answer that.
Thank you. Our next person is number 15.
Debbie Buckner, House District 137. My question is, if this resolution works, will you and your neighbors come over to the chat in the Flint and help us out with the Corps?
You know, I think that we all, quite frankly, I think all of us, no matter what part of the state or even the nation where we have, and it depends on issue by issue, but I think we have we all have a common cause to deal with the Corps of Engineers on an issue by issue basis. I understand over on y'all's side that maybe the impoundment down at Lake West Point, that in its mission of when it was appropriated for, that it had recreation in that. So, you know, y'all are a whole lot luckier than we are over on our side of the state. But, you know, I'll go to bat to any of y'all as long as you don't want to try to do interbasin transfers, except out of the Tennessee River.
That is a debate for another day. So.
I certainly understand that.
Number 17.
Thank you, ma'am. To answer Chuck's questions, 3,600 cubic feet per second is what the Corps says they need to go downstream, somewhere around there through the Augusta Dam. That's what their claim is, plus I got to figure in flood control and all that in that. The question I have for Mr. Powell was, is it not true that during the recent rain we had, you had a boat that all of a sudden started floating and wound up on a South Carolina bank somewhere, and the the game wardens had to go find it for you and tow it back? Is that so?
Right.
That ought to give you an idea how bad the lake levels are.
Yeah, thank God for game wardens, and thank God for the rains that we've had since January. My dock was 30 foot. The water had came down, and when it started coming back up, the end of my boat ramp was 30 feet from the bank in a period of weeks. So that's how much it fluctuated. Most of us around the lakes over here, we understand that things have been in a drought condition. We never had problems up on those lakes until the mid-90s. And I don't know whether it was weather changes or they like to say it's all about the drought conditions we've had. But we also suspect it's a lot more to do with power generation, of just continuing to let the water flow. So, but I will say thank God, and you know, the lights seem to be going out, so I would, you know.
I think the switch is back there. I think someone leaned up against it by accident.
I will say the lighting makes this committee a whole lot sexier and gentler. So.
And I will say on this side, the committee now has a dim view of what you're talking about. Number 18.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do applaud the gentleman for bringing this. I spoke to him yesterday, and I did ask him if we could throw the Chattahoochee in there as well. I wish that there were, I wish we could find a way to better get the Corps to listen to us, because as we said yesterday, just because it says you have a recreation authorization means absolutely nothing to them. On Lake West Point several years ago, we put together a group and raised about $250,000 and did a study to see what the economic impact of a full lake was for the community. And as you say, it is dramatic. A full lake is worth about $750,000 per year economically for the area. A lake that is maintained at just the bare minimum is probably $250,000. It is such a huge reduction. And what's so disappointing with the Corps, they have now said, rather than use their rule curve and try to maintain at their rule curve since it's been so difficult, they don't even want to do that anymore. They've said, when we get water, we're just going to send it on down because we can't maintain what we're supposed to anyway. So I applaud anything that we can do, and we'll pledge to try to help you to do anything we can, because they are, I don't know who decides how they do things, but in our case, it's something around 5,000 cubic feet per second required at the Florida line. And unfortunately for us, West Point, there were, I think, at least three or four other lakes that were supposed to have been built on the Chattahoochee. Some, I think, one or two above West Point and maybe one below. But since those were not built, we're called the workhorse of the system. So in defense of the Corps, they do need to keep as much water as they can up in Lake Lanier, because that's the big bucket up at the very top. But they call us the workhorse, so anytime they need water, they will drain us. We, just in the last few weeks, have finally gotten enough water to float some boats in there. If you've got a recreation component, when most people are several hundred feet away from the water where their docks are, it's that far down. The full pool is 635. It's been running 625 or below. Even when it would rain, they didn't keep the water. They immediately flushed it right on down. So I would, again, I applaud you, and I would love to see this committee get more involved and look at these things and see if there are ways we can get the Corps to pay attention. They come into LaGrange and they'll have these big meetings and they talk about adaptive management. We don't have to follow that rule curve. You know, we can manage this better than that. But before the tail lights are out of sight as they leave town, they're opening the gates and sending it right on down. So it is a very difficult problem for us on our side of the state. We sympathize with you and support you, and I may look at seeing about getting a resolution maybe that we could use. I'm here again. I'm not sure what it can do, but if we don't do anything, we know we're not even making an attempt. So thank you, and thank you for bringing the resolution and raising that problem up so people see it.
Well, I thank you for those comments, and you know, with the chair's permission, I'll give you a little bit of a footnote, maybe some information. It might be good news to you. And I certainly understand that y'all have a different situation with the tri-state legalities that's been ongoing since, quite frankly, almost the time I came into the General Assembly. But let me address first the economics. And you might want to go back and have a new study done on that. Up in our part of the woods up there, we have taken a look at this. And, of course, we border Anderson, South Carolina on Lake Hartwell. Then we've got Russell below us and Clarks Hill down that direction. But just in Hart County alone and the Anderson County, South Carolina portion of that, there has been studies done, and we're not talking about in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking into the millions of dollars in economic development. And it's almost been done on a graph of a schedule of when the lake drops 2 feet, how much it starts affecting retail sales, the economy, boat sales, gasoline sales, and all the auxiliary parts of this. Representative Gassaway, he represents Stevens County, which is up on the extreme upper end of Lake Hartwell. But the economic dollars that come in based just on around Lake Hartwell on that upper end of I-85, it transmits to Stevens County, to Banks County, which is off the lake 30 miles, to Jackson County, and all up and down in those trade zones. So, you know, this is in the millions of dollars, and they've got it grafted so, you know, for every so many feet that it drops. And then by the time it gets down, when the lake gets down to the point where we have seen it in recent years, people don't go to the lake. One, because it's not as enjoyable when you don't have that much of a, you know, the depth of water. It becomes a safety hazard to people, so the recreational value is almost nil. I've always thought that maybe the only thing I've seen positive out of the lake level dropping is the bass fish didn't have as much room that they could elude me. But then I realized that when I fish, even when the lake's down, I obviously don't have much luck. Maybe it's because I do more fishing out of an ice chest than I do out of the lake. But you know, but as a footnote, I would like to say what has happened out of the formation of this Savannah River Caucus. As I continue to say, we're state legislators. We have no impact on the national scene except through our voice. That's what we elect our congressmen and congresspeople and our U.S. senators for. We got lip service for years, and it was good-natured from our congressmen. This past year, when the 9th District elected Doug Collins, a former colleague of ours from last term, Doug, in the process of the election, and, you know, nice guy, he understood a lot. He understood a whole lot more when we explained it to him to get our vote to support Doug. And probably the proudest I've been is that Doug, when he went in January, met with some of these other congressmen, and they have formed a congressional water caucus to deal with the Corps of Engineers, and something I'm just absolutely tickled about, that he did this. Now, what they're doing, and this is the input of this, is that by sending a message, and that's all this resolution is, it's a message to the Corps of Engineers to be transmitted to each and every one of those. They will take that. Now, we all understand politics runs downhill. And if those congressmen and U.S. senators understand these things that are important to us, then they will then pull in where one congressman may not get the attention of the Corps of Engineers. When the general or whoever, the commandant of the Corps of Engineers, when they get a message from a number of congressmen, much less 4 U.S. senators, and you know, that's sort of unusual when you can get 2 U.S. senators to agree whether it's AM or PM, then you know, this might have some ramifications on this. And I would just, as a footnote to that, and I applaud Congressman Collins for at least for the first time we've seen someone in our part of the country that actually took an interest.
Thank you. Number 19.
Jan Tankersley, House District 160. Lines 4 and 5 of your resolution mentions that technology currently exists for real-time monitoring. Is that technology being used, or it's just available?
I have no idea. My understanding, and it's available, the tributaries that flow into Lake Hartwell, that form Lake Hartwell and the Savannah River, they know what the flows are. So they have that type of technology. You know, and I think the comment was made just a minute ago by Representative Nix that, you know, the Corps, and it's not that we consider them our enemies, because they do a good job basically on a lot of parts of that management. But, you know, it's almost like a year ago, we have a Lake Hartwell Association that is membership on both sides of the river, the lake. And the Corps had came and they promised that they were going to implement and establish a drought management plan. That was 1 year. They came back the next year, and when asked about the drought management plan, you know, we ain't got it ready, and we don't know when it'll be ready. So, you know, it's the old game of the bureaucracy, and I hate to sound so critical about it, but, you know, that's exactly what there needs to be, a plan into place, and, you know, take into consideration the economic impact of what that lake's about.
Thank you. We've got time for a few more questions, and then I know some other people have meetings at 10, so let's move right along to number, next is 27.
Thank you for the wonderful blueberry muffins, homemade by the chairwoman. We appreciate it. I'm Pat Gardner.
There's more for those who came in late. So.
I'm Representative Pat Gardner from Georgia, or from Atlanta, and I just wanted to chime in the chorus. I mean, I've moved my dock at Lake Lanier 4 times this year, and we're delighted that we're moving it in the right direction as the lake is filling up. It was interesting, Representative Tanksley talked about the technology, and I don't know if you remember, but a couple years ago, the technology failed, and the valves that were at Lake Lanier were not working properly, so they let out too much water. So there are a lot of issues the Corps faces. Mostly, I just wanted to say to the chairman, supporting Representative Buckner, if this has an impact on the Corps of Engineers, this is something we need to join together and work together on. So I would like to be part of the Water Coalition or the whatever coalition you create. Maybe we need to broaden from the Savannah River to include the Chattahoochee and other rivers.
Thank you. I will point out as well, last year we had an in-depth study by our committee. We went almost on a retreat, and the Corps did attend our meeting, and it's just part of our program, but we learned a lot. So I'm optimistic maybe more can happen that way. Let me do a couple more questions, and then the chair will entertain a motion. Number 10.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chairman Powell, I appreciate you bringing this bill, and I echo Representative Garner in saying I serve on the Lanier Caucus, and I live on Lake Lanier, and anything we can do to support your urging resolution here to get them to take attention to our issues here, I certainly support. Our lake is, I think it's been nearly 10 years we've been suffering with lake levels that have been dangerously low, not only affecting on Lake Lanier, not only affecting economic conditions around us in a study that was done a few years ago by the 1071 Coalition showing severe economic impact on our region, but also, as you mentioned, low lake levels of danger. I looked on Lake Lanier, and we were down near 1050 a few years ago, and we were close to that just 6-8 weeks ago, I think it was. But we have, Florida is urging, as the Corps is studying updating the release manual, they're urging us to go down to 1035 during drought conditions. And at 1050, we had trees sticking up out of the water. What they did when they formed the lake is they left a lot of the trees still standing. They cut the tops of the crowns out, and literally you're looking at a huge oak with limbs in the middle of the lake sticking up out of the water. I mean, you talk about dangerous, unbelievable. But anyhow, at the appropriate time, I certainly would like to make a motion to move this.
Thank you. We have an offer already on that. Number 15, and then.
Madam Chair, my question is actually to you. I agree that when we had the retreat and heard from the Corps, that was just extremely good information and really helpful. I wonder if we might ought to kind of make a promise to ourselves that we would get some kind of regular update from the Corps, if at all possible. And the other piece that I would like to know is, what kind of data and information do we collect through EPD that we could use to kind of bargain with the Corps when we have differences? I'm sure that there are gauges and information, river gauge level, water levels. There's information that EPD is collecting, and I'm sure they go to bat for us on a regular basis, but if we knew what they had, and we might be able to help them help us against the Corps, if that's what we have to do.
Thank you. And this committee deals with several different technical and scientific based information. I mean, I always feel like we're part of a college course overview, but we'll persist in trying to stay on top of our issues. Number 17, and then I will entertain the question.
Thank you, ma'am. Just a point of clarification, I had to get it back in my dumb country boy thinking. We talking about cubic feet per second. You heard Randy talk about 500,000 at Florida line. 5,000, and then I was talking about 3,100 and 3,600 cubic feet per second. What you do to get it in understandable language, for me, is to multiply that by 7.5, because it's 7.5 gallons to the cubic foot. So if you multiply cubic feet per second times 7.5, that's how many gallons we're talking about. So when I say there's 1.6 million a minute that goes through the Augusta Dam, think about 1.5 million milk jugs floating down the river. So that's how much water is going through, and Randy's talking about whatever 7 times 5,000, 7.5 times 5,000 is at the Florida line. Get it in that perspective, and you'll see how much water we're talking about that we are actually dealing with. And I have to do that to make me understand it. But that's all I want to say, that if you're talking about cubic feet per second, do that times 7.5, and that gets it in a gallon thinking.
Thank you. And everybody has one last comment. All right, one last comment from number 18, and then Representative Geisinger, I'll call on you.
Thank you. And I'll make this real quick. You'll probably get some criticism for talking about this in terms of economics. But I don't think that economics and good environmental management are mutually exclusive, because if you look at West Point Lake, which does have the recreation, it does have the sport fishing requirement, this yo-yoing up and down of the lake, the bass fishermen tell me that there are not a lot of smaller fish because of all what's going on in the last few years. Just during the spawning season, they will run the lake down to the point where the spawning areas are high and dry. So I don't think it's mutually exclusive. If you there'll be some criticism that we're trying to use them from economics, but I don't think that's mutually exclusive, and it's certainly not environmentally exclusive, because when the lakes are yo-yoed up and down, as Josh talked about earlier, it affects that ecosystem, which is very important to the whole area.
Thank you. Representative Geisinger, do you have something to say?
Madam Chair, as one who had to deal with the Corps of Engineers for 8 years as the administrator of Southeastern Power on a daily basis, I appreciate this resolution. And they were the bane of my existence when I was there for those 8 years. They just made life most difficult. Madam Chair, I move that the resolution do pass.
Is there a second? All right, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chairman, you have your resolution.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and
Thank
members
you.
of the committee. And that being said,
Pay attention,
at
please.
any time this committee would like to sit in as to see what we're doing with the Savannah River Caucus, we'd be more than glad to have y'all. And I would also like to extend an invitation for y'all that after the session and probably in the summertime, before the water goes back down, I would certainly invite y'all to come up to beautiful Lake Hartwell and Lake Russell, and Tom will feed you.
To our committee, please know to check our announcements. We're going to move awfully fast once we have the crossover day. We only have 10 days left to review Senate bills, so just be on the lookout. Thank you for coming. Be sure and check in with Michelle for your, your muffin. Your muffin and your money.